Good morning, everybody. Now, last week, Nigel Farage made a video which he put on social media that many people have seen, where he spoke about the fact that his bank accounts had been closed by his bank. He didn't say what that bank was, but there have been reports that he banked with Coutts. Whether that's the bank he was referring to or not, we don't actually know for sure because he hasn't said. But this is not the first time that someone has had their bank account closed because of their political opinions or their social opinions. He's just the most highest profile. So some people have come out and said this is something new. That's not correct. The very first people that I know of who have had their bank account closed for political reasons were people that most considered to be deplorable. And that was 20 years ago, where the BNP had their bank closed. Now, I'm no fan of the BNP. In fact, for me in the Heritage Party, it is a proscribed organisation. So if you were a member of the BNP, you cannot join the Heritage Party except in exceptional circumstances where a long passage of time has gone and you renounce your association with them. But they are a registered political party approved by the Electoral Commission to stand in elections. So on that basis, they should be allowed a bank account. You may not agree with them. I don't agree with a lot of what they say, but they should be allowed to participate in democracy and put forward their views, however much you may think those views are deplorable. They are approved and registered, as I said. So everyone should have the right to participate in democracy. Now, that was 20 years ago, before the main spate of bank cancellations have started to happen, which started about 10 years ago or so, 5, 6, 7 years ago in particular. Before then, I actively got involved in politics about 10 years ago because I was concerned about political correctness and where it was going and how people were being cancelled from the stage. They were not being allowed to give speeches or appear at university campuses. That was what the main issue 10 years ago. But then, since then, cancel culture, which is a new phrase that wasn't a phrase 10 years ago. We just used the words political correctness gone mad. But then the idea of cancel culture really encapsulates what's going on. It moved from cancelling people from being allowed to speak on the stage to trying to get their bank accounts cancelled and their access to finance cancelled. There's two things that were doing this. One, of course, is activism from cultural Marxists in their various forms, whether they're migrant rights organizations, LGBT rights organizations. They will try to cancel people who they do not consider have the politically correct views. But then there is the other stream that's doing this, which is law and legislation, and in particular, anti-money laundering regulations and legislation, which may have been put in place for the best of reasons, but it's got out of control because all kinds of people who have got absolutely nothing to do with money laundering or crime or organized crime in any sense whatsoever are being caught up in anti-money laundering regulations, which the banks have to comply with. And if you are a politically exposed person, then it's now very difficult to get a bank account opened. And they're even closing people's bank accounts because new regulations are coming in all the time. Banks are looking at compliance, and then they just don't want the hassle of dealing with people who are classified as politically exposed persons And so it's hard for those people to get a bank account. Even if you are the son or daughter or mother or father or brother or sister or grandfather or grandchild of someone deemed a politically exposed person, the 2017 regulations mean that they are all caught up as well in the net of compliance, which means that banks may close your bank account because of this. Now, this law and these regulations need to be changed because, there are people who really are organized criminals who don't get caught up in these regulations, but then they're catching all kinds of people who are totally honest and have got nothing wrong with their finances whatsoever. So moving on from the BNP 20 years ago, financial cancellation in the UK then moved on to Tommy Robinson, whose bank accounts were closed. Now, again, you may not agree with everything Tommy Robinson says. I agree with a lot of what he says, but I don't agree with some of the ways he goes about doing things. But he should have the right to participate in democracy. He's got something important to say. Then it moved on to Katie Hopkins, who's more mainstream. I mean, she was on the BBC show The Apprentice. That's how we first heard of her. Mainstream show. She was a presenter on LBC. She got cancelled from there for some little thing. I think the people, some people wanted to get her off LBC and so on. And then her bank account, her finances were cancelled as well. And she's totally a decent person. So that's shocking. Then you have Toby Young. Now, he's far, far more mainstream. And although he runs the Free Speech Union, he's selective in who he represents. Obviously, now he's speaking up for Nigel Farage. I don't think he spoke up for Tommy Robinson. I might be wrong, but I don't think that he said anything at that time. His PayPal accounts for the Free Speech Union were cancelled. Obviously, then you have far more of a mainstream figure being affected by this. So then the issue becomes, it starts to be spoken about more. And then you have, obviously, Nigel Farage now with his bank accounts being closed. We also have a number of Christians and Christian organizations whose bank accounts have been closed because they oppose the ideology of the alphabet people. So Mike Davidson, who I personally know, and great guy who runs Core Issues Trust and another charity to help people with unwanted same-sex attraction, has had his bank accounts closed for his organizations because the LGBT alphabet people want to completely cancel anyone who even mentions the idea or has the opinion that there is such a thing as unwanted same-sex attraction, often because of childhood abuse, which studies bear out. But that is a non-opinion. You're not allowed to express that opinion if in the eyes of the alphabet people. And then another Christian vicar, of course, we know the story, he's had his bank account closed by Yorkshire Building Society because he wrote to them just to express his opinion that they were getting too involved in Pride Month and putting rainbows everywhere with the transgender thing in it as well. And he's saying, well, this is not what you should be doing. You're here to deal with people's money, not to actually engage in social engineering propaganda. And he wrote a polite letter to say that, and then his bank account was cancelled. I've had problems myself. I haven't mentioned this before, but it's worth saying now. When I started the Heritage Party, I was turned down, or the Heritage Party was turned down by 4 different banks or institutions who refused to open a bank account for us. It was the fifth time lucky we applied to a bank, and we've actually got a bank account now, but we were turned down by two high street banks that everybody's heard of and two fintech companies that people haven't heard of as much, but we were still turned down by them anyway. So yeah, we were declined banking facilities by four institutions in 2020 when we started up as the Heritage Party. So yeah, we've had problems with that as well. So I totally understand how this is becoming a huge issue in society. But the people who are driving this, who are driving the idea of ESG, this social credit system that we've got behind the scenes now that is being done to us by corporations in civil society, regulating each other with this environmental social governance scoring rating, they congratulate each other for cancelling people who don't have the right opinions on climate or on the alphabet people and migration and so on. But this needs to stop. And, you know, having a bank account, as Farage said in his video, is absolutely essential for participation in society. Now, some people have written to me when I've said that, and my critics, and I have a lot of critics on social media and these kind of things, I get a pile on. They say, well, this is the same as the gay cake issue. You know, well, no, it's not, because nobody needs a gay cake baked for them. And if you want a gay cake, there are hundreds of bakers who will bake you a gay cake. But the issue with this one Asher's Bakery in Belfast that was targeted by alphabet activists who specifically went to them, and the Christian bakers refused to do this because they didn't want to. But there were hundreds of others, dozens of others. It was Belfast, so maybe not hundreds of others, but certainly there'll be dozens of others of people who could bake a gay cake. And they took the Christian bakers to court, tried to force them to do this. But in the end, they won their case. I think they had to go all the way to the European Courts of Human Rights or something to win their case. But this is not the same situation, because a gay cake is not necessary, and there are lots of different people who will provide that service. But what we have here is banking is vital for people to be able to participate in society. And it seems that with the ESG scores and also the anti-money laundering regulations, the banks, you know, obviously they've got systems where they can give you a rating with credit rating agencies that they can all access. If one bank flags you up on one of those credit rating agencies, then all the other banks can see that you've been flagged up as someone that has been refused an account. And therefore, the whole lot of them will just say, no, not having you as a customer. And you find you have been blanket boycotted by all of the banks together. So it's not the case that where you get turned down by one, you can go to another one and they'll open an account for you. It's the way that it works is that they flag dangers, as they say, up. So this seems to be what's happened to Tommy Robinson, Katie Hopkins, Nigel Farage, and certain Christian people and organisations who don't have the politically correct opinions on LGBTQ stuff, etc. So these things need to change, and of course, there are other vital services that we all need that you certainly should not be able to deprive people of, including water, energy, transport, food, broadband, mobile telephony, and banking facilities. Those are things that are absolutely vital for you to be able to stay alive and participate in society. So those things, you should not be able to discriminate against people on the basis of their viewpoints, of what they say on social media, on what they might say in an interview. This is utterly ridiculous. It's not, if someone commits an actual crime, okay, then you can, there's a difference there. Obviously a bank is not going to want a customer who is an actual criminal, but it's actually cancelling people and closing the accounts of people who are not at all in any way criminal, not even a hint of criminality, such as these Christian charities that I've mentioned. And that's wrong. And that needs to be stopped and overturned completely. So the government has to change these anti-money laundering regulations so that people who are completely innocent are not affected by them. And then the banks themselves need to be prevented from using ESG scores in order to cancel or make life harder for people who somebody somewhere says doesn't have a far left opinion, and then they're cancelled. I mean, this is cultural Marxism infesting the banking institutes. Let's take Yorkshire Building Society, for example. I imagine when it was set up, probably set up in the late 19th century, as a lot of building societies were. I don't know for sure, but I imagine. And they probably had the very, very best of intentions. It was probably an absolutely noble enterprise there to help people finance small businesses, or not, and housing, just to finance the people to buy a house and get a mortgage. And I probably, even 20 years ago, nobody working in Yorkshire Building Society would have even considered cancelling a Christian because he opposed propaganda for mutilation and degeneracy. But like many institutions, they have been infiltrated and taken over and captured by cultural Marxists who are then applying this kind of system to cancel people who have traditional Christian or conservative views. And that needs to be reversed in some way. And the people who are in there who are pushing this need to be removed, quite frankly, so that companies and institutions go back to being normal and not being activist companies that cancel and try to ostracize and demonize people who have traditional Christian or conservative views and values. And that really is at the heart of what's going on, and that needs to be stamped on and stamped out. I hope that gives a bit of an overview from my perspective of what's going on, but also, to realize that this has been going on for far, far longer than just Nigel Farage talking about it. It's good that he's talking about it because someone very high profile this has happened to, who has won 2 elections in this country. So, someone who's garnered millions and millions of votes in the European elections in 2014 and 2019, and is known by everybody. It's happened to him, so it can happen to anybody. But it has been happening to many, many people already. So this is something that's already been going on, and it needs to stop. Thanks for listening, everybody. God bless you all.